So I'm filming this on photo booth again because I'm not sure how long this is going to be. I might go on talking forever about this. I definitely have a problem with sometimes I go into way too much detail when I really don't need to. So I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum and just sort of explain this as easily as possible. So I've always kind of thought that I've had a weird taste in music. Like, ever since I was young, I've kind of always listened to the music that was, like, made fun of, or it's usually people's guilty pleasure, or whatever people want to say. I should start this by saying that I love all music. Like, I know lots of people say, oh, I love all music, and it's, like, not necessarily true, or it sounds like a cop-out to they don't really want to get into details. Trust me, I want to get into details. But I really do love all music. Like, the only genre that might be near the bottom is, like, modern mainstream country, which I know is, like, pretty common for a lot of people to dislike or whatever. But, I mean, country as a whole isn't a bad genre, so I can't even say that I hate country. So I thought I wrote it all out because there's a lot. I thought I would go through a little timeline of all the music that I've kind of like been into throughout my life, because it's all kind of like all over the place. It's seriously all over the place. I also wanted to make this video because the only artist that I've really gotten into on this channel is The Weeknd, and it really makes it seem like I really only listen to The Weeknd, but it's really just a fraction of what I listen to, even though he's like my favorite, like definitely on par with the 1975 favorite artist right now. So I talk about him a lot, but I wanted to make this to also talk about all these other things I like, because it's like he's just one piece of the pie, really. So I guess from where I'm gonna start is obviously the 90s. I was born in the early 90s, so obviously my musical journey started in the 90s. I would suppose that my musical journey really started with my mom and what my mom would play around the house. Like, many kids probably grew up on whatever their parents were listening to. So my mom was a clubber in the 80s. So she, like, every weekend pretty much went dancing at gay clubs. And so by the time that she had me, she had these tapes that DJs had like made like mixtapes for her of her favorite songs, and she also had records of a lot of her favorite songs. So I grew up on a lot of 80s dance music, and because she danced at gay bars, I had like two major artists that I know for a fact that she played all the time were Culture Club and Bronski Beat. I know that for sure, like, one of the earliest favorite songs of mine that I still love is Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. Like, that was played around my house all the time. The Bronski Beat song that would be my mom's favorite is Why, or Tell Me Why. She really loved that one. So those two songs were played a lot when I was a little kid. So whatever that did to my little kid brain, teaching me about what good music is, like, I think it really says a lot to how I progressed as an adult. When it comes to stuff that I was getting into, the stuff that was kind of like the top 40 stuff, so when we listened to the radio, I watched a lot of, in Canada, we have Much Music, which was like MTV. Around like the late 90s, they also introduced Much More Music, which was even better, and I remember my mom calling me out into the living room being like, there's another music channel you have to come see, and the first thing that I saw on that channel was a Shania Twain music video. I remember that. I don't know which one. She's like walking through a white hall. I don't know which one that is. So the first artist or group that I really got into obviously was the Spice Girls. I was so obsessed with the Spice Girls. I had like my own Spice Girl persona that I called Sugar Spice. And I always drew them, like made fan art. And the funniest thing though is that I didn't own any of their albums or like tapes or CDs or anything. I didn't own any albums. I only knew their singles, and we would tape their music videos off TV, and I would watch those and listen to those, and they played on Much Music their Live at Wembley, which I watched all the time, so I was very familiar with all the songs in their Live at Wembley, and of course the movie Spice World, which is still a great movie. I still love that movie. So yeah, Spice Girls was really big. And then directly after that, I went into Britney Spears. So Britney Spears obviously came out just directly after Spice Girls. I got really into Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. So this was like essentially like early 2000s, very early 2000s, was like dominated by Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. My favorite albums, like the peak of this loving them, was definitely Britney's album Britney and Christina Aguilera's album Stripped. I still really love those albums to this day. I super idolized them. I wanted to be a pop star. Like, it kind of started with Spice Girls and like wanting to be a Spice Girl and making up other kind of girl groups in my imagination, and of course pretending I was Sugar Spice as well. But then with Britney and Christina, I really wanted to be like a pop star, and I really wanted to do what they were doing. So that was kind of like my childhood dream, which of course has not happened. But also in the early 2000s, I listened a lot to Ashanti and Jennifer Lopez, but also along at that time, super contrast, and I don't know how many people had like their faves be so contrasted at the time, because I feel like this was like supposed to be two groups of people. It was like the Britneys and the Avril Lavignes. And I loved both of them. I was obsessed with Britney and I was obsessed with Avril Lavigne. I loved both. I loved Avril's first album, Let Go. I always listened to that, and just like that was definitely one of my favorite albums, and I really liked her second album as well. But at the same time, I loved Britney Spears, so I don't know what that says about me. I guess I'm a bit of both, of a rebel and also sugary. I don't know. But yeah, so if there's anyone else out there who liked both of them, that would be cool to know, because I don't know, I feel like you were only supposed to like one or the other, but I liked both. But yeah, I also really liked like Hilary Duff and Gwen Stefani. That definitely was my life. And I think growing up on pop music and having like my introduction to music be pop music is really important, and dance music, obviously. Like, I really try to think of like how my music taste has evolved, and I think starting with pop really left me a very broad landscape to get into so many other things, because pop pulls from so much and it's influenced by so much that there's all these little things in pop music that, well, if you like it in pop music, if you like the pop version of it, it's easier to get into the other version of it. So once I start getting into the mid 2000s, I don't know what happened here. I don't know what happened here. I was really into pop. Everything was pretty sugar-coated to a degree. Like, they were pretty sexual, I guess, but it was never really anything too, like, aggressive or anything. So I guess I started getting into my angsty phase, and the beginning of my angsty phase was gangster rap. Like I said, I don't really remember how it started. I think around 2003, 2004, I started getting into 50 Cent. I don't know what you heard about me, but I just can't get a dollar out of me. I like heard the singles on Much Music and stuff, and I liked them, but it really wasn't until 2005 when The Massacre came out, and it was just full blown. I was obsessed, in love with, wanted to marry 50 Cent. Yes, I am fully admitting that on the internet, that I was like so obsessed with him. Oh my god. As a 13-year-old, as like a 13, 14-year-old, I was just so obsessed with him. And through him, I got into like a bunch of other rap. So like me and a best friend of mine, she really liked Eminem. So like her number one artist was Eminem. My number one artist was 50 Cent. Obviously they were related and did a lot of songs together and stuff. So there was a lot of Eminem and 50 Cent going on. A lot of G-Unit, D12 type stuff. Like all of their friends, we kind of like dabbled in all of that. But then I also really got into Joel Santana, What the Game's Been Missing, I think came out 2006. And I was really obsessed with that album. And another sad confession I have to make is that I was really obsessed with Chris Brown. I loved Chris Brown's first album, and I used to like write out the lyrics to it. I was just so into it. I fucking loved that album. But I didn't listen to pretty much anything else he did. I liked a couple of singles after that, but I kind of like fell off, and then of course stuff happened later on, and I was like, well, at least I wasn't a fan of him anymore by that point. So this was like, yeah, mid-2000s. Really into rap music. Really loved rap. Much Music had a show called Rap City that came on every Thursday at 9 o'clock, and I never missed it. If I missed it, I was sad. So, in the mid-2000s, there started a new trend. And this trend is obvious on me now, but at the time, I wasn't into it. So, I remember when Fall Out Boy came out. I'll probably do a whole video about Fall Out Boy one day. I remember Sugar Going Down came out, and all I listened to was rap, and still like Britney Spears and stuff, honestly. Like, pop and rap, and I was like, what is this? I don't like this. Get this out. I would change the channel when like the Antlers came on the TV, and I was like, nope. But then Dance Dance came out, and 16 Candles came out, and I was like, okay, maybe I like these. And then I went and took out their CD from the library because I didn't have the internet at the time, so that's how I listened to music, was renting CDs from the library. And my life changed. So 2006, I took Out From Under the Cork Tree, and my life changed. Goodbye rap music as being the dominant thing for a while. I did still listen to rap music, so that's important to keep in mind with me, is that everything that I've listened to, I never really stopped listening to. Around this time, it was the explosion of emo. We had Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, My Chemical Romance. I started getting into bands that like weren't playing on TV, which was a big thing for me because I was like, I had to find these bands via the internet when I was either at the library or at a friend's house, and had to take out their CDs from the library. So from like 2006, 2008, roughly, I had like my top 5 favorite bands that I listened to all the time, which was Fall Out Boy #1, Panic at the Disco. This is in order of how I had it. The Academy is, Cobra Starship, Gym Class Heroes. So there you go, there's the rap coming back in. Number 6, if I had to have a bonus, would have been My Chemical Romance, but I wasn't really as into My Chemical Romance as it seems the stereotypical emo is supposed to be, so sorry about that. I do really like 3 Cheers and Black Parade, but that's about it. But I was also listening to like All Time Low and stuff like that a little bit, just like songs here and there, Forever the Sickest Kids, some random songs here and there. At the same time, I remember No Transitory by Alexisonfire coming on TV. And once again, at first I was like kind of, I don't know if I like this because of the screaming. So the screaming thing was kind of new to me. There was some screaming in Fall Out Boy, but it wasn't very like in your face like No Transitory. So it took me a little while to like grow into it, but I was like, I like this song. I knew I liked Dallas Green singing, but when it got to the really heavy screams, I had to kind of brace myself a little bit, so it did kind of have to grow on me, but now I love screaming. And then also around 2000, yeah, I guess 2006, 2007, Arctic Monkeys came out. So that is also a really big band for me. So I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor came out, and I really, really love that. By, I think, like 2008, I had taken out their second album from the library and was like, yes, I love Arctic Monkeys. So also around in 2008, so in my grade 12 year, I really did get into Alexisonfire, and I was like, at the beginning of the year, really, really obsessed with Crisis. I listened to that album all the time. And then I met my first boyfriend at the time, and he started getting me into some other stuff that I would have like never been exposed to. Like, I don't know how I would have found these people. Like, none of my friends, here's something I should mention too. Throughout my life, none of my friends have really listened to the same music as me. Like, there would be some overlap, but it wasn't very much. Like, I didn't really have any friends who were into Fall Out Boy. I was constantly made fun of for liking Fall Out Boy. My friends might have liked maybe a couple songs by them, and I would be like, ha ha ha, you like some of them. But most of the time, I was completely made fun of. I did have friends who liked Panic at the Disco, and that was like the universal band that like everybody seemed to be into. Everyone loved Panic at the Disco, so that was nice. So in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009, 2010, I started really getting into Brand New, Bright Eyes, Portugal the Man, The Faint, Elliott Smith, and Neutral Milk Hotel. I got super into that kind of stuff, especially Brand New and Bright Eyes. Actually all of those. But Brand New got me through some shit, let me tell you.
Jesus Christ, that's a pretty face. Time you found in someone I could save. If they don't put me away, it'll be a miracle.
I remember really liking The Faint, especially because they had that electronic influence, and that's when kind of at the time I realized, I was like, I think my favorite, because this is kind of true for some emo too, like Cobra Starship and stuff, like, I really, really liked rock music that incorporated electronic. And I was like, that is my favorite genre out of everything, is rock with elements of electronic. Like, I didn't know what to call it, but that's kind of how I described it. So when I discovered The Faint, I was like, where have these guys been? Oh my god, I love them so much. So I still love The Faint. Actually, one of the members passed away recently, which is super sad. So now we're in the early 2010s. So I guess at the time I was listening more to some like indie stuff or whatever. So yeah, late 2000s, early 2010s, I also got really into Lady Gaga. So I listened to a lot of Lady Gaga, and actually one of the first videos I ever filmed of me talking was me talking about how much I love Lady Gaga, which is now gone into the ether and no one will see me plus I was filming it outside and it was windy and you can barely hear me, so it's a bad video. But Born This Way came out. I did like that album, but I didn't like every single song like I did with Fame Monster. Yeah, I don't know, I really stopped listening to Lady Gaga after that. Like, rip Lady Gaga. I don't even listen to those old songs anymore. I probably should. So 2012, I was introduced to Lana Del Rey. So this is when Lana Del Rey comes in. She is now one of my favorite artists of all time. I think she's amazing. So yeah, 2012, a friend of mine played Born to Die for me, and I was just like so in awe of her voice. I was just like, this is the greatest voice I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe this is amazing. And also around this time, I was still listening a lot to Portugal the Man. I was obsessed with Portugal the Man and Lana Del Rey in 2012. In 2012, I started hanging around with some people who were like ravers and DJs, and we were going to clubs and raves, and this was really just in 2012. Like, I was really only in this friend group for less than a year, probably. So I kind of started listening to some EDM and getting into that, and this was also like the height of dubstep, when dubstep was big, and I liked dubstep at the time. What bothered me was that everybody was like so narrowly into EDM and their specific like house and drum and bass and stuff like that, and I'm like, I like these things, but like there's so much more. There is so much more. There was a few people in that group that listened to other things, but I always kind of felt like a bit of an outcast, being like, I like EDM, but it's not like the only thing that exists. So I would say I dipped my toes into the water of EDM a little bit that year, and then at the end of 2012, I met someone who reintroduced me to the emo world. I was, unfortunately, blissfully unaware of Pierce the Veil. And this person introduced me to Pierce the Veil and Bless the Fall. And I was like, holy shit, this is my shit. Where has this been? I missed this. You know, like at the time I had like straight across bangs. I dressed pretty normy. Like I had said in my emo video, like I really didn't feel comfortable ever dressing emo or scene. Even though I liked it, I just knew, you know, people made fun of it and I didn't really feel comfortable. I didn't want to be looked at in that way. I just kind of dressed normal because that was comfortable and easy. I did have emo bangs in grade 12, but my straightener broke. It's like the stupidest story. My straightener broke, I couldn't afford a new one, so I just cut straight across bangs because my hair is actually wavy, and I used just like a round brush to keep the bang straight, and that's all I did for years. By that time I was like, oh well, if I grow out my emo bangs it's gonna look stupid for a while, so I always put it off because I'm like, I don't want to look stupid. 2013, I was like, fuck it, I want my emo bangs back. I've always wanted them back, and all these years I've just been having these stupid straight across bangs that I didn't actually want. So 2013 was emo revival, and it was Pierce the Veil, Sleeping with Sirens, Bring Me the Horizon, Of Mice and Men, Day to Remember, Memphis Mayfire, and also Lights. Funny story about Lights. This is another artist that I hated when she came out because I really wanted a keytar and I really wanted to learn the keytar, and that was inspired by Cobra Starship, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna come out and like be a singer with a keytar. And then she came out as a singer with a keytar, and I was like, that was my idea. So I kind of hated her for stealing my idea, but I mean, my family couldn't afford a keytar, like I couldn't even play piano, so I don't know what I was thinking. I did get into her around this time, so now I love Lights, and I've actually seen her live and met her, so I love her now, but I definitely did not at first because I was jealous. So that dominated that year entirely. This was also the return of Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy came back from hiatus, so this was like perfect time for my emo revival, so that was great, and I remember being really, really excited about that. And then 2014 was not really any different. Like I was still listening to a lot of that other stuff, like the emo stuff, but I had like, in the summer especially, I had like this Lana Del Rey phase. So I got into Lana Del Rey in 2012, but in 2014 she released Ultraviolence, and I also found her like first album, Lizzie Grant, and I got super into Lizzie Grant, and also found like this, like someone had posted a download of all of her unreleased stuff, which I don't really do with artists ever. I don't listen to leaks or unreleased stuff, but at the time I was like, I'll check this out, and there was so much, like there's so much unreleased stuff, and a lot of it was like unfinished. I don't know what happened. I guess she got hacked or something, which is pretty unfortunate. But I loved quite a few of those songs, so I was listening to a lot of that, a lot of Lizzie Grant, and Ultraviolence, which I was stoked on the title of course, if you've seen my favorite movies video. And then, if you've seen my weekend video, you know what's coming. 2015, The Weekend. I could have stayed, but I chose a lie. I chose a lie. Obviously, 2015 was dominated by The Weeknd. Listened to pretty much nothing but The Weeknd. Like I said, still also listened to all the other stuff that I had accumulated over the years, but mostly The Weeknd. And then at the beginning of 2016, the 1975. I had heard of the 1975 in 2013 when their first album came out. I'd followed some people on Tumblr that talked about them. I listened to, I think, Girls in Chocolate, and I was just like, I was like, whatever, this is okay, I guess. And I wish that I had had a friend who liked them and was like, nah, you gotta listen to the rest of it. Because if I had listened to the rest of it, I would have liked 1975 since 2013. And they also played a show here that I remember hearing about and being like, I don't really care, I'm not really a big fan of them, so whatever. And I didn't go, obviously. And I fucking wish I did, because it was at a small venue. But all I knew was Girls in Chocolate, and I was like, those are okay, I guess. I don't know, it didn't really move me. Beginning of 2016, end of 2015, around, the people that I followed on Tumblr that liked them were posting about, like, they erased everything, and they started doing this marketing scheme of posting kind of cryptic stuff, and I was seeing all of this, and I was like, this is kind of cool, like, okay. And I started listening to, like, indie dance playlists at work. Like, we would just, like, play Songza doesn't exist anymore, and on some of those playlists they had Chocolate and also The Neighborhood, so I got really into The Neighborhood too at this time, and I was like, actually I like Chocolate. And then Love Me came out, and I was like, actually I like Love Me and Chocolate, maybe I do like them. And then someone I know, I had told this to them, like, oh, I think I do like them, and they were like, you have to listen to their new album, you have to listen to it, it's amazing. And once again, life was changed. I listened to I Like It When You Sleep, and I was like, holy shit, especially when it got to Somebody Else, I was like, that's it. I fucking love the 1975 now. And then 2017, there wasn't really anything new that was coming. I was still listening a lot to 1975 and Weeknd. So I was kind of trying to find good trap. And I was like, I know I like trap. I know I like that kind of sound, but I wasn't sure what artists to really get into. I would listen to just like trap playlists on Songza and eventually Google Play, and was like, I like this, but none of the artists, like, I tried to listen to Travis Scott and was just like, I like some of his songs, but I can't say that I'm like a big fan of the album really. Yeah, so I'm like, I liked putting on a trap playlist, but as for like specific artists, I never really got into anyone that much. But also in 2017, I really got into Melodrama by Lorde, which was produced by Jack Antonoff of Bleachers, so I was also listening to Bleachers a lot. Other than that, didn't really listen to anything new. 2018 comes, and I'm still like, where's the good trap? Trying to figure it out. Was listening a little bit to Travis Scott, Kendrick Lamar, Roy Woods I tried to get into. I really like maybe like 2 or 3 of his songs, especially Get You Good. I really like that one. I tried to listen to Future. I got into a couple good songs. I listened to Evol, Future's album, around the beginning of 2018, and discovered Fly Shit Only, which is like an amazing song that I was not expecting to hear. That was really great. But other than that, still, I was like, other than like and Kendrick's not necessarily a trap artist. He's like, he does other kind of hip-hop sounds, and he's an amazing lyricist, and I really respect him as an artist, but I still didn't really, like, get into him like I have with other things. So, yeah, 2018, mostly carryover from 2016, 2017. Until the end of that year, I started getting into Lil Peep. You ain't getting nothing that don't tell me you nothing like them other motherfuckers that could make you rich. Lil Peep had passed away in 2017. I started getting into a few songs by him, but by the end of it, I was like, I discovered Hellboy and Crybaby and got super into him. And then someone at my work had introduced me to Suicide Boys. At first, when you hear the name Suicide Boys, You're like, okay. And I went and looked them up, and I listened to Carry Yourself Part 3 and Paris, I think. It was like whatever the first two songs were, which I'm pretty sure were those two. And I was like, whoa. Like, I was kind of not expecting this. I mean, I don't know what I expected, but I just remember being like, sort of taken aback and being like, okay, interesting. Then over like the next couple months, I was like listening to more and more songs by them, and then I was like, okay, I love them. And Suicide Boys took over my life. And it doesn't help that they have so much music. Like, they have so much. So there was a lot to get into, and it was just, I was going through it at the time, I have to admit. So it was just really, really good for me, and it made me feel a lot better to listen to their music. And I was like, yes, this is like exactly what I've kind of been looking for, and I really, really love this. So last year, 2019, essentially dominated by Suicide Boys. Suicide Boys all the time, Weekend sometimes, 1975 sometimes. Puya, I got really into. He had released his album, The South's Got Something to Say, and I love that album. I think it's amazing. I think it's way better than anything that he's ever put out, so props to Puya. I really, really love that one. I've listened to like a little bit of other G59 artists, but they just never really grab me as much as Suicide Boys does. So yes, I listened to a lot of Suicide Boys. I am planning to do a video kind of about Suicide Boys in the future. It's something that I'm kind of like have to like write and work on. It's not just me talking about them. So look out for that if you like them. I am going to make a video about them. But then also, at the end of 2019, I rediscovered Arctic Monkeys. Like I said, I got into Arctic Monkeys from their first and second album, and then every album that came out, I loved it. Suckin' and See, I was kind of like not in love with. I used to say they were like my favorite band before Suckin' and See came out. For a period, it was like, what's your favorite band? And I would say Arctic Monkeys. Suckin' and See didn't really grab me right away. I like it now, but at the time I was kind of like, I don't like this one as much. But then AM came back, brought me back into it, and I really, really liked them all over again. And that was at the time of the emo revival, so they were still there. But Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino came out in early 2018, and I remember listening to it and being like, this is interesting. It was not what I expected to hear. I only listened to it once because I just listened to it through while I was getting ready one day to go to work, and I was just like, okay, it's like a concept album. It's kind of weird. Like, I'm gonna have to pay attention to this. But at that time, it wasn't really the kind of music that I was listening to, so I didn't listen to it again until the end of 2019. And by that time, I listened to it again, and I was like, this is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard in my life. I can't believe I kind of like slept on it for this long. Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino. Mark speaking. Please tell me how may I direct your call. So it kind of brought me back into Arctic Monkeys, and now I listen to Arctic Monkeys more regularly again, especially Tranquility Base. Also, Last Shadow Puppets, which is Alex Turner's other band with Miles Kane. I got into Last Shadow Puppets, their first album, so like 2008 was when I really first got into Last Shadow Puppets, but they were just kind of like one of those alternative bands, which I'm going to mention some other ones that I listened to. Just one of those other bands that I listen to sometimes, but their first album did not get me as much as their second album, which I believe came out 2016. And when their second album came out, I was like, this is one of the greatest albums I ever heard. And so when I got into Tranquility Base, it really reminded me of Everything You Come to Expect. So those two albums, they're just so beautiful and wonderful, and I love them so much. So now it's 2020, we're going into the 20s, and I have to say that I really do have my mains now, and my mains are The Weeknd, the 1975, Suicide Boys, Arctic Monkeys, and then I'll listen to like some emo stuff still sometimes, but really it's a lot of Weeknd, a lot of Suicide Boys, and a lot of 1975. I guess that's like my new holy trinity. So that kind of covers like what my main favorite music is. I know it kind of sort of goes all over the place, but it goes even more all over the place when you start looking into like the other kind of stuff that I was into here and there. So other things that I'm into, 80s synth pop. I love 80s synth pop. If you just put on a playlist of 80s synth pop, I'm just happy. I don't care what artist it is. Like, I have really only delved into Depeche Mode, Joy Division, The Cure, Echo and the Bunnymen a little bit. But really, I love so many, like Tears for Fears, Duran Duran, Gary Newman, Talking Heads, Sushi and the Banshees. One of my favorite songs from this era is a song Love Like Blood by Killing Joke. I had a friend who made a mix CD for me once who was really into this kind of stuff, and he put that song on it, and that's like one of my favorite songs of all time. I love that song. It's so good. So 80s synth pop is very close to my heart, even if I'm not like super 100% familiar with all the artists and their discographies like I am with my favorites. I love it. It's all amazing. I love it. And then 90s alternative, especially female artists, I really like listening to playlists that have this kind of stuff on it. So I remember on Songza there was like Whip Smart Women of the 90s was one of my favorite playlists to listen to. I really like that one. So I really like Hole and Alanis Morissette, Fiona Apple, Smashing Pumpkins, Radiohead. So a lot of 90s alternative stuff like that. I remember Radiohead was like my sleep playlist. Like, I really liked listening to Radiohead when it was nighttime, but one time I woke up in the middle of the night to Fitter Happier and I got the total creeps and I had to take that song off the playlist because I was like, that song creeps me out too much in the middle of the night. I thought there was going to be a robot that was going to come kill me or some shit. I was so creeped out. And then I also really like 60s and 70s music. Like, I know a lot of my peers, a lot of people my age, their parents played a lot of 60s and 70s music around the house. I know one of my best friends' dads always played a lot of like what is called like dad rock or whatever around the house. And so she got really into like Pink Floyd, and I like Pink Floyd, but it's not that I don't like know them super intimately, but I do like them. If somebody put on a Pink Floyd album or a playlist or something, like, I'm going to enjoy it. It's good, of course. But I also I love the Beatles, so lots of people love the Beatles. A lot of people hate the Beatles. But yeah, I love the Beatles. George is my favorite Beatle. I love Hard Day's Night. That's a movie that I really should have mentioned in my favorite movies because I love Hard Day's Night. I think it's one of the funniest movies of all time. I super recommend it. Like, even if you don't like Beatles music, it's just hilarious. It's so fucking funny. It's one of the greatest movies. It just is. But I also really like Fleetwood Mac, Janis Joplin, Elton John. So another kind of sound that I will just find a playlist and put that on when I feel like listening to that. Yeah, so lastly, another genre that I'm going to mention is 2000s alternative. Don't really know how else to call it. Obviously, this was like me growing up, so this was like the popular music at the time. So all of this is not only nostalgic for me, but also just like really great music. I really loved Franz Ferdinand, Kasabian, The Strokes, The Killers, Queens of the Stone Age, The White Stripes, Foster the People. Lots of 2000s kind of like indie dance, stuff like that. Really like all that kind of stuff. So that's basically all of my favorite music in a nutshell. I almost guarantee that I'm probably going to forget something and I'm going to be like, fuck, I didn't mention. I totally did. I forgot Fantagram. Fantagram I got into probably around 2011 when their first album came out, when I first heard When I'm Small, and I've loved them ever since. My favorite album is 3. I love Fantagram, and I completely forgot about them. Yeah, I really like all sorts of things. I like all music. I like meeting people of all sorts of music interest and hanging out with people who like all sorts of music and going to shows and dancing, and music is just amazing. I don't hate on anything really. Like, there's a lot. I've always kind of felt sort of like an outcast with the kind of music that I have always been into, like whether it was like made fun of or I'm not emo enough or not indie enough or not hip-hop enough or whatever, because I just like so many things that I can't narrow it. I can't narrow it down. Not metal enough, not goth enough, not punk enough. I like all of it. All of it. I went to a metal show and told someone I liked The Weeknd and they were shocked, and I can like both. You can like both. We can all like all sorts of music. You don't have to narrow it down. I love all of it. I don't even know. I like all of it. Everything is good. I love all music at the end.